Okay, so this is my presentation on amendments to the Constitution. Amendment is a change to the Constitution within the Constitution itself. There's an article that describes how the Constitution can be changed. Recognize that the Constitution wasn't perfect and may need to be changed. The framers of the Constitution, put that article in there, and since the time the Constitution has been passed, it's been amended 27 times. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution were actually added pretty much all at once. This is one of the first things that the first Congress worked on, and that's because the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists couldn't fully agree on the power of the national government. So to compromise with the Anti-Federalists, the Federalists promised to add a list of rights that could not be taken away by the government, and we call that list of rights the Bill of Rights. It's also known as the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. Beyond the 10, there was another 17. The Constitution has been amended, as I said, a total of 27 times. I'm not going to hit all of those amendments, but after the first 10, I'll hit another 7 or 8 or so. So we'll begin where we should begin with the First Amendment. The First Amendment covers free speech, press, religion, and assembly. In America, you're allowed to have whatever opinion you want, and you're also allowed to print that in the newspaper or put it in the radio or put it online. You can practice any religion you want. You also have the right to assemble and protest your government. Again, these are sometimes called our first freedoms. There are some limits to them. I can't yell fire in a crowded theater and have people trampled to death, and I can't print lies about somebody in the newspaper and get them fired. My religion can't include human sacrifice, but other than some small limits, these are basically the first freedoms, the main rights that Americans have. We also have the Second Amendment, right to bear arms. This amendment was passed both for personal protection as well as for protection from a tyrannical government. In fact, arguably the founders of our country, this was the main reason they included the Second Amendment, although in recent times the Supreme Court has ruled that this also means you have the right to personal self-defense. The Third Amendment says that the government cannot station troops in your home. This is from the time of the American Revolution, when British troops were actually stationed in people's houses. The founders of our country wanted to make sure this didn't happen again. The Fourth Amendment to the Constitution involves searches and seizures. It's basically your right to privacy and property. And essentially what it says is the government cannot unreasonably search or seize any of your property. Basically, we as Americans, we have an expectation of privacy. We want to be left alone. We don't want the government in our homes or our businesses, reading our letters, listening to our phone calls, reading our emails. Again, we have a certain expectation of privacy in the United States, and the Fourth Amendment spells this out. You might recall during the times of the American Revolution, British officers had writs of assistance. These writs of assistance allowed British officers to search anytime, anywhere, whoever they felt like, and it was a very harassing policy embraced by the British king. Today, if the government wants to search your home or read your emails, they need what's called a warrant. A warrant is specific permission from a judge. There's probable cause, so the government has some evidence that you might be doing something wrong, and they use that probable cause to get a judge to sign a warrant, and with that warrant then the government can invade your privacy or seize your property. So again, the Fourth Amendment protects us from unreasonable searches and seizures. The government requires a warrant backed up by probable cause that you've actually done something wrong in order to search or seize your property. The Fifth and Sixth Amendments basically deal with rights of the accused. One of the things that the framers of the Constitution were afraid of, one of the things that the early founders of our country were afraid of, was if the government is coming after you for a crime, the government having unfettered power. So we spelled out all kinds of rights. If the government's going to come after you and take away your life, liberty, or property because you've committed some crime according to the government, there's a whole bunch of hoops they have to jump through. A couple of those hoops include a grand jury. If you're accused of a really serious crime, a group of your peers have to decide if there's enough evidence for the government to even charge you in the first place. So say, for example, you're charged with murder. Even if you're found innocent at the end, just being charged and put on trial for murder can certainly ruin your life. So a grand jury would be a group of your fellow community members who the government goes to and says, hey, look, we have all this evidence that somebody committed a murder. We would like to charge them with murder. And it's up to the grand jury to decide if the government has enough evidence to even charge you in the first place. In the Fifth Amendment, you're protected from double jeopardy. This means you cannot be put on trial for the same crime if you've already been found innocent of it. Again, to try to prevent the government from just arresting and retrying and rearresting and retrying the same person for the same crime over and over again. Essentially, once you're found innocent of a crime, you can never again be arrested and charged with that same exact crime. Now, again, if you commit that type of crime, say again murder, somebody else, they can pursue you for that new crime. But for the old crime, once you're found innocent, you're innocent forever. You have the right to remain silent according to the Fifth Amendment. In fact, sometimes this is called taking the fifth. You may have seen that or heard that on the cop shows. So you don't have to say anything to incriminate yourself. This is to protect us from either being tricked into sounding like we're guilty or being coerced or tortured into confession. This is why we have the Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. Everybody has the right to due process. So basically, if the government's going to charge you with a crime and put you on trial and try to take away your life, liberty, or property, there's a whole series of steps they have to go through. Grand jury, trial by jury, witnesses, all these kinds of things. All this process, whatever process is established by law, that's the process they have to follow, and that process has to apply to everybody. So if they arrest one person and pursue one person for a crime, similarly, they have to follow the same process for other people. So again, we call this due process. The one part of the Fifth Amendment that's not really related to crimes is what's called eminent domain, but that's because it's related to due process. And the idea with eminent domain is the government can seize your property if it'll benefit the community at large. So say, for example, the county wants to build a highway through your backyard. They let you know they want to use the back couple acres of your property to build this highway. You, of course, protest because you don't want a highway in your backyard, but they go through a process where there's hearings and discussions and eventually perhaps a vote or something where it's determined that, yes, in fact, it will benefit the thousands of people of the county to put the highway in your backyard. They are then allowed to seize your property. They do have to compensate you for that property. That's the eminent domain part. They can seize your property, but the government must go through a process and then compensate you for that property if they take it. You also have the right in the Sixth Amendment to speedy public jury trials. Again, dictatorships and tyrannies, they throw people in jail, never charge them with the crime, never put them on trial. They basically just let them sit and rot in prisons. We don't believe in that in America. We say that you have to be given a speedy trial. So the longer you sit in jail, the more likely your lawyer is going to protest and say, you know what, we're violating this person's Sixth Amendment right to a speedy trial. You're taking too long to put them on trial. So the government has to put you on trial in a timely manner. Trials have to be public. We don't believe in secret trials in the United States. Both the record of trials as well as the trials themselves are available to the public. Again, this is because dictatorships and tyrannies, they put people on trial in secret. People disappear, people are arrested, people go to prison camps or are executed, never to be seen from again, and people aren't even exposed to the process by which it happens. Finally, there's a jury trial. The idea is going back through British history. The British and later Americans believe that instead of just having a royal judge or somebody appointed by a king deciding if you're guilty or innocent, it's a jury of your peers who determine guilt or innocence. Basically, you'll have a trial where the government will present all kinds of evidence that you committed a crime. Your lawyer will present all kinds of evidence that you did not, and it will be up to a jury of your peers, some fellow community members, to decide whether or not which way the evidence indicates. Are you guilty or not? So, speedy public jury trials, these are all part of the Sixth Amendment. You also have the right to witnesses. Two parts of this. Number one, if there's a witness against you, you're allowed to confront them. So your lawyer is allowed to question witnesses and question the testimony of a witness who maybe is part of the evidence against you. Additionally, if you have a witness that perhaps could benefit you, you can ask the court to force that person to appear. So say you've been accused of a crime and you were fishing with somebody that weekend, you could have the court force that person to come to court and explain how they were with you that weekend, again, that you couldn't have possibly committed the crime. So you're allowed to confront witnesses as well as compel other witnesses to attend your trial. Finally, you've heard this on the cop shows, you have the right to an attorney. If you can't afford one, then one will be appointed to you. Arguably, a little bit what's unfair about our system, if you are wealthy and you're able to hire a expensive, effective lawyer, then you're probably going to have a better chance of getting off from your crime than somebody that just has a public defender. So Fifth and Sixth Amendments, the big thing is that they defend people's rights who are accused of a crime. Seventh Amendment, say big civil suits get a trial. Basically, this means a civil suit is where two people have a disagreement on a contract. One person breaks a contract. If they're suing each other for a large enough amount of money, then it's not just a judge who decides. Like maybe you've seen Judge Judy and, a small claims court, $500 or $1,000. If it's a really big amount, then greater than $10,000, I believe that's the cutoff. Don't quote me on that. But a large amount of money, it's a jury of your peers who will listen to the evidence from your side and the other side to determine who owes who how much money. Eighth Amendment, I call it the Science Class Amendment. This protects us from cruel and unusual punishments. There's no torture or harsh punishments allowed according to the Constitution. Additionally, excessive fines or bails are not allowed. So you can't get like a $10 million speeding ticket. The Ninth Amendment, I call it the Other Rights Amendment. Basically, you have the right to chew gum and eat cheeseburgers and dance the Macarena. Just because it's not listed in the Bill of Rights doesn't mean you don't also have those type of rights. Finally, the last of the Bill of Rights, the 10th, is the States' Rights Amendment, and it basically says that all powers not given to the federal government in the Constitution belong to the states. So basically it reserves for the states various rights that aren't given to the federal government. Those are the first 10. That's the Bill of Rights. The Constitution has been amended a total of 27 times, so I'm going to hit a couple of the other ones just real quickly. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery. We sort of learned about that already during the Civil War. The 14th is called the Equal Rights Amendment. This was passed shortly after the 13th because African Americans were still being discriminated against. And basically the 14th Amendment says everybody is supposed to be treated equally under the law. The 15th Amendment protected African Americans' right to vote. Even after they were freed and made equal citizens, southern states were still oppressing their right to vote, so we amended the Constitution to protect their right to vote. The 16th Amendment created the income tax. Of course, after the passing of the income tax, our federal government grew exponentially. The 18th Amendment made alcohol illegal. It was later repealed by the 21st. Essentially, all the crime that developed related to the abolition of alcohol, the prohibition of alcohol, was deemed too much, and so they repealed it with the 21st. This is the only amendment to have been repealed. The 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote. Again, ladies, sorry, it took us till like 1920 to finally recognize that you were equal citizens. The 22nd Amendment limited the president to 2 terms. You might remember President Washington served 2 terms. Every other president after him did, except for Franklin Delano Roosevelt. In the 1930s and 40s, he was elected 4 times. He died during his 4th term. After he died, the Constitution was amended to limit every president to 2 terms. The 26th Amendment made the voting age 18. This was passed during the Vietnam War. Basically, people said, we've got 18-year-olds going over to fight and die in a foreign country, and they can't even vote for or against the people who are sending them there. Lastly is the 27th. And this is Congress getting a raise. This was an amendment that was passed to make sure if Congress ever votes itself a raise, yes, they get to control their own pay. If Congress gives itself a raise, the raise does not take effect until following the next election. This way, if they give themselves too big of a raise, of course, we won't re-elect them, and so it kind of hopefully prevents them from getting too greedy. So those are most of the first 27 amendments to the Constitution. Again, this is sort of an 8th grade version thereof. I'm not a legal expert, and anything I may have slightly confused, please forgive me. But hopefully this will help you if you miss class or to review for upcoming tests on civics. Thank you all for listening.